for March 6th of 2023, and start with a roll call, please.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and take a roll call. Chair Moore.
Here.
Vice Chair Six.
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Here.
Board Member Black.
Here.
Board Member Noon.
Here.
And Board Member Whalen.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can open public comment now. Do we have anyone that would like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore and board members. So just as a reminder, if anyone wishes to speak in person, please fill out a speaker slip by the back door for general public comment. But at this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, so I'll move to virtual public comment. At this time, I don't see anyone joining via Zoom. So I'll go ahead and move to written correspondence. We did receive several letters from May O. Mahoney, Antonio Arredondo, Paul Phillips, Michaela Hayes. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Chair Moore.
Okay, then we can close public comment and go to approval of the minutes for February 21st.
So moved.
Okay. Can have those up just for reference. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Black. Any discussion? No? Okay, let's take our vote.
All right, Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, and then the consent calendar for today.
We did not
Didn't
have
have
a
it,
consent
okay.
calendar today.
Then we'll move on from that. Okay. Any announcements, requests by applicants, et cetera?
Thank you, Chair Moore. Today, we failed to put on the agenda cancellation of 1309 Castillo Street, so a lot of the public comment that was received was regarding that project. It has been continued indefinitely. Well, it's not postponed indefinitely, so yes.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
the only announcement. Oh, and one other announcement. We do have a new commission secretary for ABR, so it's Mariah Johnson. Yes, so we've lost the last one, but we've gained a good one too.
Okay.
So,
Welcome. Okay, anything else? No? Okay, any subcommittee reports from anybody? Nope. Okay, well then, I don't know if it's too early, but we can start when we're able to on item 1. A couple minutes?
yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay. While we're waiting, any timeline on an additional board member or any news on that?
No update.
Okay.
I think we've been looking, but I cannot provide an update. I just don't know.
Okay.
Chair Moore?
Yeah.
In the
Please.
time we have, in reviewing some of the public comments from the first item we have on the design development, design guidelines, the question occurred to me. We, in our compatibility analysis, every time we approve a project, we say that it doesn't affect public views. And I don't know, and in my research for the next item, the only public views that I'm aware of are in the coastal area. And I would like staff to research to see if there is further definition of when and where public views inland are to be considered.
Most certainly, I think at the next meeting I can have something available to just kind of discuss what a public view is
Yes.
and give an update on that. So
Okay, thank you.
for bringing that up.
And I bet our presenters have some info they can share with us on that.
Well, it is 3:05, so I believe
Okay,
we can
let's
go
do
on
it.
to item 1.
Okay, item 1. Discussion item, draft objective design and development standards. Request for input on the administrative draft of the objective design development standards. Our board's input will be relayed to Opticoast Design for consideration in the revised draft. Hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at those before this. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Moore and members of the board. I'm Rosie Dicey. I'm project planner in Long Range Planning in Community Development Department, and I'm here today to present on the admin draft, Objective Design and Development Standards. So today, part of my discussion will be just giving you a little bit of context and background on this project. This is we've come before your board before, so we're sort of returning for some specific input. So we're looking for your feedback on some questions we already sent you, and I'll cover the next steps. Before I start, I want to acknowledge all the work that's gone into this project to date. We have work group members, including Richard Six and David Black from the Architectural Board of Review. We have Robert Dooley and Dennis Dorden from Historic Landmarks Commission, John Bauke from the Planning Commission, and Cass Ensberg and Deddy Pikart from the American Institute of Architects. And we have also received a good amount of public input. We have at least 9 or more public input letters, and we've had a lot of input from staff on this admin draft that we're still going through. So why are we looking at adopting objective standards for housing? It's because state laws have been increasingly requiring objective design review for, in particular for housing that has an affordable component, but also for other types of projects. And we know that our zoning standards alone do not necessarily result in the desired building form for our city. So we think we need these new standards to address features that are important to the neighborhood character and design. So as a city, in order to respond to these state laws, we do need to provide a streamlined design review process and the list of application requirements for these types of projects, and then the objective standards, which can be checklists, maps, diagrams, and zoning ordinances. So the focus of this particular product is to facilitate housing production, reinforce neighborhood character and scale, and promote high standards in architectural designs. So we have been asked a few times, these standards are, to meet the goals, they're being proposed as a form-based code that couples form with building or with architectural style. And I wanted to quote something from our consultant, because we've been often, there's been some public comment like, why are we doing this as a form-based code? And it kind of goes back to what gets initially proposed versus what's actually approved and built in Santa Barbara. And our consultant said, through that analysis, we realized there are issues with building footprints, building scale, and organization of multiple buildings on a parcel design site that were not being addressed by existing zoning, but are built into the discretionary review process. In addition, we found that these issues went beyond architectural style. So to objectify the highly desired outcomes that you currently achieve on a consistent basis through the discretionary review process, we had to address these issues in the most user-friendly and predictable way by creating a form-based code. So some of the milestones on this project, the major ones is that we did get a grant for this project that was awarded in 2021. And because of we had that funding, we were able to put out a request for proposals, and we did select Opticos as our consultant. In 2022, they released an existing conditions memo, so that's where they documented what they saw in our city as far as size, bulk, and scale, and also they compared our zoning envelope versus what's been approved for certain projects, just to see how that process has worked. They also released an admin draft of the Objective Design and Development Standards, which we decided to provide for everyone at the same time, the public, staff, boards, and commissions, for their comments. And we did a visual preferences survey that's posted online, but we're actually in the process of summarizing what we found from that survey, and when we have a report that goes with that, we'll post that online as well. And then this year, we hope to take the admin draft that has been out for the public and revise it, and then carry it forward for adoption hearings. So when we initially released the admin draft, it went out in October, and we asked for public input until December 2022, although we're still taking public input through these board and commission hearings. But we do need to wrap up our public comments and all the input we want to give back to our consultant by March 10th, so that we can then get our consultants busy on the next draft. Again, we've been taking work group and HLC and ABR input on specific topics. We do have over, I'd say about 300 comments from work group members. Mr. Six has been very active in that regard, and we appreciate that. And we probably have over 400 comments from staff. So we're doing a lot of work right now, pulling that all together and getting it back to our consultant. Just to summarize a few of the common themes we've been seeing, and there's more than what's on this slide, but we do want to simplify the document as much as possible. We've been asked to use local photos, and we already have some staff assigned to gathering those photos, and we will take your suggestions as well. In fact, we'd really like it if you had ideas of what to photograph. We want to make sure it's really clear what parts of Title 30 still apply to projects, and if they're using this process, what parts of this new Title 25 would apply. There is a signs chapter in here, but that will be separated out and reviewed and adopted separately. And the civic spaces chapter, we're thinking of sort of making some changes to it and incorporating it elsewhere in the document rather than a separate chapter. So those are some of the few things we're looking at. What I'm going to do next is I did send specific questions to your board ahead of time, and I'm going to go through the slides. And then when I end, we can go back to them if we want to have a discussion about some of the things we're looking for from you. So first, in Chapter 3, there's about a 3-page section of height and massing transitions. And this is where we're trying to make objective what's often a subjective process through discretionary review. So what we've noted already for this section is it does need a purpose statement because it's not really clear what it's trying to achieve. We think the section should be moved as to the general site design standards. And the different illustrations and standards in here need to correspond to each other, and we think they could be simplified and combined. Again, there's another one specific to parcels that are on the same block as designated landmarks and structures of merit, and we had a discussion with the Historic Landmarks Commission about this section. So we can come back to this, but we'll be asking you if there's any other situations that need to be considered. Did they go far enough? Maybe could this same result be achieved another way? And then rooftop decks, we had a pretty robust discussion with the Historic Landmarks Commission on these standards. So we do want to know from you, are there other issues that need to be considered? We talked about, actually, I'll just tell you now what we discussed with the Historic Landmarks Commission. We talked about the glass guardrails, and they suggested no glass guardrails within El Pueblo Viejo or other historic districts. We talked about whether to allow a trellis or not on a rooftop deck. We've already discussed not having allowing any enclosed roof decks, but maybe allowing just a trellis. We talked a little bit about setbacks of rooftop decks and if they should be the same from primary and secondary streets. And we also talked a little bit about shade items and what should or shouldn't be allowed as a shade item on a rooftop deck. And then the architectural design standards section, we are in particular looking for your expertise on these standards. And just as a background, we had enough funding for 3 major style groups, and each style group has 2 different subgroups. Some of the comments we've already noted is there's a lot of architectural terms that we think should be defined in this section. There's a couple questions we have about materials. For example, this allows standing seam metal roofs on the Craftsman style. We'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And we think we need to clarify with Opticos which buildings can be designed with flat roofs. Right now, only block scale Main Street buildings and Core Courtyard allows flat roofs. But they show flat roof examples on other types of buildings, so we need to clarify what's the intent there. We also want to know from your board is, aside from El Pueblo Viejo, are there other areas of the city that should limit the styles allowed? Do they capture the essence of each style, and is there enough flexibility? So the next steps would be to take all these comments, like I mentioned, get them back to our consultant, and then wait for the revised draft that we could take forward to the Planning Commission for a recommendation. And then the regular adoption process would need to go through an ordinance committee and city council review. Because it's a grant-funded project, it does need to wrap up by the end of this year. So that concludes my presentation, and like I said, if you want to go back to certain slides while we're having a discussion, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay, then we need to open public comment. Do we have anyone that would like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore and board members. So I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do have 2 requests to speak, and I'll go ahead and start with Fred Sweeney. Please come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Push the button. Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. I have already submitted a letter and a map to you. I won't go into detail. I was just going to cover one thing, but in light of Mr. Sick's question, I'm going to cover 3 things. First of all, the word compatibility. As a member for 10 years of the Single Family Design Board, compatibility was a big, big issue because it goes beyond just downtown. And as far as I can tell, there is no definition in any of the ordinances because compatibility by its very nature and definition is subjective. So that's an issue. The other is public views, and that came a lot at Single Family Design Board. We were told by the city attorney, public views are those that can be seen from the public right-of-way, whether they're to the mountains, to the ocean, down the street, whatever. And I'm sure staff will sort that out for you. And in the minute I've got left, I just want to bring your attention to the map I gave you, because I think that's the most important thing, at least my comments, is there going to be some neighborhoods where I don't think we're going to want contemporary architecture. One of the things I ran out of time, thank you, Ms. Deisty, who's just trying to pull this thing together in her time frame. I ran out of time to identify some things on that map that are important. The area between State Street and Highway 101, Mission, and Haley, more or less, is just filled with designated structures. So why would we want to introduce contemporary architecture in that neighborhood? There are gateway areas to our city that pronounce us as a Spanish-style piece of architecture that could be subject of contemporary architecture. I think that needs to be thought through. There's some other neighborhoods that I explained in my letter, but I would hope you really pay attention to this map because I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and up next we have Rick Clausen. If you would like to come up to the podium.
Thank you. I'm a mere citizen, probably one who will never come as an applicant before your board or need to use this streamlined system. However, I have concerns about it for the livability of our city and its attractiveness to visitors. I presented similar comments to HLC last week, but today these are streamlined as befits a streamlined proposal review process, and it's a good thing that it's streamlined because if it weren't, you'd be looking at a 600-page document in front of you. First of all, I greatly appreciate the tremendous effort on the part of the staff and the consultant, but we are the ones who are taking the great leap of faith here that objective design standards and the scary thought of ministerial review will give us different, maybe better, outcomes than our current system. Second, where this proposal is very specific about trees, I worry about the general forest being missed, that individual detailed standards will all be met and the resulting buildings will still be ugly or seem out of place in their neighborhoods. Third, where the proposal is nonspecific, I worry it offers opportunities for profit-driven developers to succeed with their least expensive but ministerially acceptable projects that pencil out and are labeled cost-effective. Fourth, we don't need to look elsewhere to anticipate that inexpensive success will breed more copycat inexpensive success. Fifth, I'd like to see more zoning expressed within the document, not just a central map to label certain areas that neighborhoods that might not have official designations or style projections or protections, but which retain characteristics of the earlier building periods that anchor the fabric of our city today. And finally, I worry about a possible overuse of the contemporary style group, which I expect will be the least expensive to build in Santa Barbara with our strong history of earlier architectural styles. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
All right, so that's all we have for in person. So I'll go ahead and move
We
to.
have somebody with their hand in the air, if you could come up.
Yes, please come up.
Afternoon. My name's Pat Saley. I'm sorry I missed Rosie's recap. You're so streamlined. You started early. Because I don't think the minutes have been posted yet, right? From HLC the other day? No. Just 4 quick things. First of all, this is hard to do because design is subjective and we're trying to put it into neat little boxes, and that's just difficult. Some of the things that came out of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting and that several people raised were concern about landmarks, and many of them are smaller stature, and as buildings get bigger and bigger to add density, how can you objectively design to respect those historic structures that are very important? Another topic the other day was about rooftop decks, because in my humble opinion, what is in this admin draft, and I realize there's drafts, et cetera, to come, very permissive. And I think that's a big problem. And HLC did indicate they didn't think anything should be enclosed, obviously elevator towers, but have it be that whatever's on the roof as unobtrusive as possible from the public street. There seemed to be agreement that some styles should not be allowed everywhere, and entrances to the city, the area between Santa Barbara High and Junior High should be Mediterranean. Milpas has its own character. Should that be Mediterranean? A lot of work needs to go into that. And then lastly, how do we respect mountain views, particularly on the, I suppose you'd call it, south side of State Street, looking to the mountains? How do you put the concern for views into objective standards? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess now I'll move on to Zoom public comment. So at this time, I do see one hand raised from Mr. Steve Johnson. Mr. Johnson, I'm gonna go ahead and send you an unmute request, and you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll be very brief. My concern is with the state's density bonus program that in principle could result in structures as high as easily 75 feet, but possibly more. And the draft objective standards don't address that issue at all. I'm sure no one on this board wants to see such a project, but part of the objective standards is that you're going to have such projects that you won't be able to review. They'll only be addressed with objective standards. I think this would be a good opportunity to get in as much advice to such developers as possible regarding such structures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
All right, so that's it for virtual public comment. So I'll go ahead and acknowledge the written correspondence we received. So we did receive emails from Richard Clausen, Patricia Saley, Steve Johnson, Fred Sweeney, and Suzanne Wood. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Chair Moore.
Okay, let's close public comment. Ms. Deisty, how would you like us to approach? Normally we do a series of questions and then go to comments. How would you like us to
So
do
Chair
this?
Moore and members of the board, you're welcome to ask any questions, of course, but we could go back to the specific questions we had asked of your board on the slides and start with that, go through them one by one, and then have a discussion, maybe questions and discussions on each one, and then move on, if that works for you.
Okay, we have about 20 more minutes scheduled. So I would say to the board, let's try and respond to the questions posed before we kind of go off the rails and ask all the questions that we want to ask. Okay?
To the really pertinent questions.
Okay. Do we want to bring those up and then we can try and, there we go.
Yes, so I'll start with, again, Chapter 3, transitions, where there's several situations where a building would potentially be limited in height if it's built next to a building. Existing building is lower, new building's higher. Maybe there's a setback on the new building. Are there other situations that need to be considered? Again, do they go far enough, or there's some other way to achieve that result, is what we specifically asked.
Okay. Mr. Whalen, do you have any input or
Well,
thoughts?
in that regard, Ms. Dicey, how about looking at it from the opposite point of view? What are we trying to avoid, like putting a 6-story building next to a 1-story Victorian cottage? Is that the purpose here?
Yes, members of the board, that would be a situation we'd want to avoid, a very, very tall building next to an existing lower scale building.
Thank you.
Okay, any thoughts on these three questions? Or,
I'm still thinking.
okay, Mr. Noon? Any?
I don't have a lot of detail to say, but I think it's in the right direction to do exactly what you're doing is consider those adjacent properties, in whether that's setback, height, certainly style. So yeah, I think I'm supportive of it and think it's appropriate.
Okay. Mr. Black, anything?
Yeah, just in general. So to me, it sort of ties back to neighborhood compatibility as well. I mean, if you have a neighborhood of, 1-story bungalows, and it'd be difficult to sometimes justify, a 6-story building in that neighborhood. So, again, that's an issue we deal with all the time, and I'm sure so does HLC, but I'm not quite sure how to address that necessarily, but as far as transition standards go, I think compatibility, is an important factor. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay. I have a question for you. So specific to the standards that are proposed, are there any locations in the city where there's like the NS area is adjacent to anything besides the NM?
So, Mr. Chair and members of the board, so just so everyone knows, NS is neighborhood small and NM is neighborhood medium. And I do believe they are next to each other. And I could ask my colleague Brenda, do you remember? No. Yeah, we're deeply involved in reviewing this, but there's so much in it that we don't remember all the details.
all the
But
detail. Because, to answer that, your first question, I think that's kind of the area where the most friction could potentially be, where the NS area might be adjacent to something like the
I think Main Street.
medium Main Street, or
Yes,
whatever the
correct.
term is. I think the scale difference between the NS and NM seems relatively similar. Well, not relatively, relatively doable as far as a transition point, in my mind, as proposed. For number 2, so I think the standards go far enough as proposed. I think they're similar to what a design review board would try to do to make that transition happen. So I'm not sure how else you could achieve that. My concern is that the standards would be so restrictive that there might not be, the applicant probably wouldn't choose to go through the form-based code version, and they would have to go through design review to try and achieve something that's feasible for them, for that property. So that's my only concern.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I think our work that we're doing right now to simplify this a little bit and make it a little more clear might help that concern.
Okay, great. Vice Chair Six?
Yeah, I already identified these questions in my comments back as work member, so I'll just reiterate them here for the record. Are there any other situations that need to be considered? We've already identified the historic extra sensitivity, and I'm hoping that HLC has addressed that more appropriately than I, or more intelligently than I. It's very hard to imagine whether these will go far enough in the, in concept and in the pretend world. It'll just, I think it's just going to have to be a test of time to see if those transition standards go far enough. I think that there's no way to tell at this point. I do think that, I think we're going to find that the transition standards are only applicable in very few situations, and so it's not going to be a big significant problem as we move forward. And number 3, is there another way to achieve the same result? And as you're aware, I commented on, I think that the present standard says 30-foot setback from, I think it's the first or the floor above, I'm not sure which it is, but that seems to be a very coarse a large transition, and when these building widths get down to 50, 60 feet, the developer only has a little sliver of those top stories to develop. I think that one of my suggestions, and another way to do it, would be to introduce a boundary line similar to the solar ordinance, where you go straight up a certain height and then over at a certain angle, that allows a less coarse setback than a 30-foot setback, and boom, boom. So those are my responses to those 3 questions.
Okay, Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, I was able to take a look through all of these, and I think they make sense for the most part as far as having a transition area, especially next to historic structures. And hopefully HLC commented on the fact that Santa Barbara slopes, and that there's an exception to having that same ground floor plane at the same level. And I think there was an exception in the draft with within 10%. And I'm just curious if anyone has taken a project and actually tested the draft.
Chair Moore and members of the board, that's a great question, and that's something we wanted to do as staff, is take a existing project and then see, does it fit in these standards? We do intend to do that. It's just a matter of having time and the right software to do it, but we're working towards that.
Cool. Yeah, I think my same concern was the 30-foot setback. specifically in this transition area, and then how wide our typical parcels are, and if that actually works. And then, oh, and the other thing that Chair Moore said about, is it too much that someone might not actually use this and use a streamlined system to even do a project, just because it is limiting on how much you can do, and is it like the cost benefit analysis, basically. So those are my comments.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, real quick, before we move on, there was something else that came up at HLC that I thought would be good to repeat here. We were asked, can these standards be changed once adopted, or what's the, because we may have standards like this and then realize they're not quite working out how we expected. So I just want everyone to know that there is a process, just like any zoning ordinance amendment. These can be amended once they're adopted if we try them out and find out it's not resulting in what we want.
What's that process like, though?
Well, it would be the same process as a zoning ordinance amendment, so it would take, hearings through Planning Commission, Ordinance Committee, adoption by City Council to make changes, but it's something maybe we collect, we find errors or things that need to be corrected in a year, collect them all and bring them as a packet is one option.
Okay. Okay. Shall we move on?
Okay, so rooftop decks, again, I mentioned, this was a robust discussion with Historic Landmarks Commission, and we already feel as staff and from the comments we've heard that we do not want rooftop decks necessarily to be enclosed. Potentially, I'd love to hear your thoughts on having some standards, though, for open trellises or pergolas. Again, some input on glass guardrails, windscreens, or anything else you think of that might be useful.
Okay. Let me start, Mr. Whalen. Any thoughts?
Sure. I do have a specific question, Ms. Deisty, on, let's see, number 4, penthouses. It says a slope of the roof of the penthouse structure to follow the slope of the interior stairway. Can you explain that? I always need a graphic, and I do think that's one of the strong points of the form-based design is providing graphics. Can you explain what that is?
Chair Moore and Commissioner Whalen, or Board Member Whalen, I believe that's one of the comments we have back to our consultant, that we want them to do a graphic to show that, so.
Can you explain briefly what the idea behind the phrase is?
Could you remind me again what part that was in?
Let's see, I have it under number 4A, under stairs and penthouses.
Oh, yeah.
Slope of the roof of the penthouse to follow the slope of the interior stairway. I guess I understand that, but.
Yeah, I would
Is that just to kind
assume,
of consolidate everything in one small area?
I think so. I mean, I think the intent is I can only do it by showing hands, but
Yeah.
your stairway's going up like this, and the roof on the top of the penthouse needs to sort of follow that slope. But again, that's one of the things we need to get clarification from the consultant.
And then, according to a recent project we just had proposed to us, I think the inclusion of swimming pools should be part of this rooftop deck discussion. I think other public comments have made that too. That's all I have to offer, I think. Oh, yes, on number 3, enclosed portion of the rooftop deck, openings or glazing shall be a minimum of 75% of each side of the rooftop deck. I'm not sure I quite grasp what that is, that the intent was to have certain portions of it enclosed or have certain portions open? Just
Okay, Chair Moore and Board Member Whalen, that portion of this standard we're already proposing to eliminate because we don't want to require rooftop decks to be enclosed, so I think that won't be an issue anymore.
Oh, that's a quick and easy way.
Yeah.
Good. I'll remember that.
Okay. Mr. Noon, any
I
thoughts?
didn't have anything for this.
Okay. Mr. Black?
Me neither, thanks.
Well, on my thoughts are, that, I mean, I guess the approach to try and limit the size of the rooftop deck is interesting. I don't recall, is it specific to each proposed zone of development, though? Or is it just a blanket percentage?
Chair Moore, we're still looking into that as well. And another thing that we need to clear up with our consultant is, and I may have already mentioned this, but only a couple building types allow flat roofs. So we need to clarify which building types allow rooftop decks, and then if so, yeah, the size comes into play because it depends on the building type and how big that building can be.
Okay, like, we'll get to the flat roof discussion, I think.
Okay.
But, okay, because I think that's, the proportion of roof deck to building size is kind of the important aspect of it. I wouldn't expect that, maybe in the smaller zones or the kind of more smaller massing zones, there'd probably be fewer roof decks proposed because you have generally more open space on the ground, I would
Yeah,
think.
correct. And I'm curious to think if you have a suggestion, is there a good proportion of the deck versus the entire roof that would be good to, or a maximum square foot of a rooftop deck?
Yeah, that's, not off the top of my head.
Okay.
No. And so Mr. Whalen brought up the sloped roof, should match the stairs, slope of the stair. I don't think that is necessary. I think that's going to lead to some kind of awkward and odd design up there. So that's what I have to offer. The glass guardrails, again, I think it really depends on where those end up being in relationship to the perimeter of the building. Maybe they need to be, if you're going to propose glass guardrails, maybe they need to be set back a certain distance so they're less visible.
Can I follow up and ask, if they're not visible from public view, is that something you could support? Or
Yeah, because generally the issues with glass guardrails are reflections and things like that. So it's not necessarily the visual aspect of them, it's what are the ramifications for impacts on neighbors and things like that. So
Okay.
that would be my concern. Obviously, there's going to be others that feel that stylistically they're not appropriate for certain styles, so.
Correct, yeah, that was a discussion with HLC, is maybe only allow them with the contemporary style and not the other styles.
Okay.
Not sure. Thank you.
Vice Chair Six?
Yeah, just to aside on glass rails, there was a period way back when on the ABR that no glass railings were allowed, as on the, for instance, on the Riviera, the low sun would reflect the rail down to downtown. So it was an interesting discussion. But I think, yes, that the roof decks as proposed on the present draft are way too loose, and it sounds like the HLC has done some heavy lifting there, and I wish that I had privy to those discussions before this. But yes, I think that as I always try to do and have been frustrated to get trellises even on, third and not even on the topmost deck, but to get trellises set back from the perimeters and so forth. So I think trellises could be allowed, but a significant setback. What those numbers are, what the numbers, as you ask, on percent of deck to rooftop, I just don't think I'm prepared to, I think we need to battle that or to refine that in other meetings. I know that right now we have coming to the board today a project that has a significant roof deck, and be interesting to see where that goes. It's a luxury, well, I won't go into it, but it's a very appropriate question. But yes, I think that the rooftops, decks and so forth should be a lot more limited and a lot more restrictions on them. The other caveat is, and I don't know whether it's just this one talented architect, but we've seen some, canvas awnings and fun rooftop deck, rooftop ornamentation. Who am I thinking of?
Let's not be specific.
Okay, let's, but, perhaps, canvas and awnings and other decorative, not massive, but light gauged structures should be also included. I think that's my comments.
Ms. Anderson?
Okay, I won't reiterate what everyone else has said, but I agree with the pergola or trellis could be allowed on the roof deck with setbacks. I do think the 10-foot tall maximum measure from floor to ceiling could be reduced to like a minimum of 8 feet. And I think the picture used should be local, or at least it doesn't look local. I don't know.
Yes, thank you. We agree on the picture too. That's one of the ones we will replace.
Okay. We are running short of time here, so is there anything else?
Well, I could summarize what we heard from HLC on the, aside from EPV, are there other areas of the city that should limit the styles? And I'll let you know, we do plan as staff and to take the public comment we got, go through the map, and look at areas of the city where styles should be limited, maybe just craftsman and style group and the Mediterranean, and not allow the contemporary style group is probably the thing we've heard the most. HLC even mentioned taking out contemporary altogether, but I don't think that was unanimous. It was a couple of members who thought maybe industrial was okay, but not contemporary. I think I've heard elsewhere that we do need standards for contemporary, and applicants are proposing them, so if they want that style, we should have standards for them. So that sort of summarized what we've already heard. So I don't know if you want to add anything quickly to that discussion.
Okay. Mr. Whalen, anything quickly to add?
Well, definitely not quickly. I have kind of a roundabout on this. Ms. Deisty, as I understand this entire project, and my kudos to you and your staff for being master chefs on an 8-course meal. It's really hard to digest. And as I've listened to HLC comments and other comments, the number of projects that this would really fall under is really quite small, isn't it? If you were to look at all of the projects that came to the city in the past year, say, not that many would really fall under this, would they?
Members of the board, that's correct in the sense that it will only apply to new projects. It only applies to certain areas of the city, and it's an optional process. So the developer would have to want to go through this document, make their project match what's in it, and thereby receive a faster design review approval. But I don't anticipate a lot of projects.
My understanding of the Senate bills also is that it has to have a certain percentage of affordable, either 10% or 50%, somewhere in there. So really, this set of guidelines isn't really going to involve that many projects in the foreseeable. So with that in mind, I would just make one style acceptable, Spanish colonial revival, and jettison the rest. And that would simplify everything and not affect that many projects and still add to the perceived quality of Santa Barbara.
Okay. Mr. Noon, anything to add?
I'll just number one, I'll address that. I think it was mentioned in the public comment. I would support other places outside of the EPV area that would have the guidelines.
Okay, Mr. Black?
Nothing to add.
Well, let's, Ms. Dicey, do me a favor and flip back one image to the style category. So I think, just as a point of clarification, I don't think any images on this screen are showing a contemporary building. Very familiar with the building that you're describing as contemporary. But I wouldn't call that a contemporary building. It might be contemporary for Santa Barbara, but it's certainly not a contemporary building. So you may need to find a better example of that in Santa Barbara, which might be difficult. But so from my perspective, I think the calibration of what that means is different to different people, obviously. So I would be hesitant in saying that, or in agreeing with Mr. Whalen and saying that, you know, we should, to make it simple, let's just do this one style. I think that would be detrimental for the city as a whole. So if we could flip back over to your questions. So I don't think we should limit styles other than those gateway locations that when projects come before us, we definitely take that into account, location. Is this an area where people coming to see our city are going to enter and exit and have that, if the building may have some effect on that I think is important. I think obviously proximity to historic resources is important. That's going to guide the style choice. So for number 2, I don't know that the standards capture the essence of each style, because the contemporary thing is contemporary. So you can't really pin that down to a specific timeline or time frame. And then the design flexibility, it's hard to know until it's really, somebody can really test it. There's certainly contemporary projects out there that I have in my mind that could be massed in a similar style as a Spanish colonial revival building. There's certainly opportunity to do that. So that's my perspective. Mr. Six?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Moore. Yeah, I think that we should go ahead and refine the map to indicate where the other styles should be limited. I think there's been a few examples mentioned by the public and so forth. The question of gateway is a real tough one. When and where is a gateway? And I know that the board has used in the past that logic to curtail contemporary or non-traditional Spanish architecture on the gateway, but I think the tough nut will be to determine and define that. Obviously, coming off the freeway, that's a gateway, but how far into the city does that go? We had two projects, one on Santa Barbara Street and one on Garden Street. Garden Street is a direct gateway. It became a very Spanish traditional. The one block over was allowed to be more contemporary, and I think that was a good decision. So how far and where is the gateway will be the tough nut to crack. And I don't know what body or how far-reaching the decision on that will be, so I'll leave that to you. I think that the contemporary should be included, but as I've pounded and tried to get contemporary to a soft, warm contemporary with texture and wood and cool colors. And contemporary usually starts off with very cold, sharp edges, cold colors, glass, steel, and so forth. So I think that we could allow contemporary, but it should be very, I would desire it personally to be a very limited takeoff on contemporary. I think for lack of time, I think that is what I need to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, I think on the map, it maybe use 2 different colors and be a little bit more specific as to where the Mediterranean style group is only allowed versus where all styles are allowed. And then maybe do an overlay of the EPV on that map as well. I think that would be helpful, and I'm sure someone else has already told you that. Is there enough design flexibility? I mean, with what's in here, it gives you lots of options for materials. It gives you like 3 different styles for windows. I mean, it seems like someone who's not an architect could come in and like pull like a building together, and it'd be kind of generic. So I don't know. I guess I don't know what the response is to that, but maybe if you can do a test of a project, then that would be interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Okay.
Yes.
If I may address one thing that I think a lot of the public had comment and concerns about are mountain views. And I don't see any way that mountain views, a very subjective thing, will be next to impossible to codify. I think the appreciation of the mountains in Santa Barbara is kind of a multi-point collection of your experiences when you're on the freeway, when you're in the mountains, when you're on the beach, so forth. You get the sense, and the visitor would get the sense of the mountains. To specifically pin down and modify a specific point out to the mountains for a specific project, I don't think that's number one, would be impossible. I don't think that is what we should be doing. We should look at mountain views as something that we experience as in our collective experiences as we go through the day in different places, rather than trying to codify where those mountain views would be for each specific situation.
And Vice Chair Six, I believe the city has established mountain views that are view corridors that are documented.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, so this concept and idea of public views and protecting public views has definitely come up several times, and we've talked to Opticos about that. Of course, they want to hear from us because it's very, very difficult to do, because it's usually a case-by-case basis. I did want to mention that our coastal zone is the one place in the city where we've really mapped and codified public views, and we have standards in the coastal land use plan that protect those public views. That is a goal of the city. It's in our general plan to actually document public views and do evaluation criteria. It's a general plan, possible implementation action to be considered, but it's something that the city hopefully will do someday, so the inland areas are protected similarly to the coastal areas. It's generally acknowledged, and the consultant mentioned, that our height limits do, to some extent, protect views of the mountains, the ones that are codified in our city charter. So at least we do have that as a starting point. But when it comes to view corridors and things like that, we do need to extend what we've protected in the coastal zone to the inland areas, document them, and then know what to do about them when it comes up.
Would that be a part of the design standards?
it can't be part of this project. We just don't have the staff or funding to do it right now. But like I said, it is a general plan implementation action that should the city fund it and assign staff to do it, we'd be happy to do it.
Okay. Well,
Mr.
unfortunately, we need to move on.
A
Sorry.
final comment
Yeah.
to respond to Member Six's inclusion of contemporary. I would think that, well, by your own definition, a warm and cozy contemporary versus a cold and hard one would be terribly difficult to codify, and it would be much simpler just to jettison, for the purposes of form-based and their code, to jettison contemporary design. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. I appreciate your input.
Yes, and I think everyone should please feel free to continue the conversation with Ms. Dicey.
That's correct. Although if you want a specific edit for this version to our consultant, please get it to me by the end of this week if you can.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to item 2, please. Okay, so this is 533 East Mitchell Traina Street. And this is continued item here for project design approval. This project proposes new condo development under the AUD incentive program. Project consists of constructing a new 45-foot tall 6-unit building in the location of an existing parking lot adjacent to an existing 48-foot tall mixed-use condominium building containing 2 residential units and commercial office space. The resulting 8 residential condominium units, 6 new, 2 existing, would have a residential density of 16.3 dwelling units per acre. The project proposes 47 parking spaces. The project has a land use designation of medium-high density of 15 to 27 dwelling units per acre and is zoned residential multifamily. Project approval is requested and requires compliance with the Planning Commission resolution and the compatibility analysis, the urban design guidelines, infill design guidelines, and outdoor lighting design guidelines, and was last reviewed June 13th of 2022. And we have a planner here. Would you like to add anything before we jump in?
Thank you. Megan Arciniega, I'm the project planner. I'm just here to answer questions. The project did go to the Planning Commission for approval of a condo subdivision map, so that's why it went to Planning Commission. And so it's been complete, the environmental's been completed. We're just here for final approval, sorry. Project design approval, apologies.
Okay, is there anything from the PC resolution that affects the aesthetics, et cetera?
A minor item, so the sidewalk in front of the new building is now extended the entire width of the parcel lines. That was a comment that your board also made. How the main reason for that comes from transportation and the pedestrian master plan requirements. So it was quite an engineering feat. I don't know that we need to go into the detail of it here, but there was a lot of engineering that went into completing that sidewalk, allowing for ADA accessibility, drainage, preventing drainage from going into the parking garage itself, stormwater retention requirements, right-of-way stormwater retention requirements, parking lot access, driveway dimension requirements, just a slew of engineering work that went into that design by the applicant team. And the last element of it was just continuing it to the edge of the property line. There is a retaining wall, existing retaining wall that is on the adjacent parcel that's vacant. So if you recall, there's an adjacent vacant parcel that's not owned by this property owner. They have not succeeded in acquiring it, although they certainly tried. It would have been a benefit. They were unable to do so. So that parcel remains vacant. There's a retaining wall that sits on it. The sidewalk now continues into that element. So I'll let them answer any questions on the landscaping or engineering design. But that's really the only, the Planning Commission, just one of our conditions was to wrap up that element.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Then our comments from last time were the Board appreciates the applicant's response to the board's comments. We appreciate the location of the transformer and the screening. Appreciate the sidewalk has been continued. The board is in support of the size, bulk, mass, height, and scale. Architectural style is compatible, appropriate landscaping and open space, and we could give the project design approval at the next meeting. And here you are. Okay, welcome back.
Thank you. Melissa Turner with Design Arc. We're here with Mark Kirkart, also principal.
And Kim True with True Nature Landscape Architecture.
Megan did already a really good job presenting the project. I think the last time we were here, we were near ready to get PDA, but had to go to Planning Commission for our other approvals and the tentative map. So the only change that we did since the Planning Commission hearing, like our staff person indicated, was the revision to the sidewalk. Let's see if I can get this. If you'd like, I'll just skip to that site plan. This driveway had to be redesigned for transportation comments and engineering, like we discussed earlier. You had already seen this transformer relocation, but since the last time you saw it in June, the landscaping around it has increased because of this driveway redesign, and then landscaping to the north of that driveway as well. And then here's the portion of the sidewalk that extended beyond all the way to the northern property line. There's an existing retaining wall here shown with my little cursor. So there's a little bit of some grading work that needs to happen to make that work. Otherwise, the project is pretty much identical to what you've seen it. Unless you have any questions, that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Kim, maybe talk a little bit about the landscaping. Get to that page.
And not much has changed on the landscape since you saw it last. We retained everything from the previous time you saw. Go to the next one. The shrubs have been, rearranged to provide more screening for the transformer, allow for the transportation triangle. We still have the trees flanking that driveway, and still have a tree proposed where the sidewalk extension was in front of the building there, tall, narrow tree. So it's more or less just rearranging what we already had. And we're still maintaining all of the existing trees along Mitchell-Torena Street. Just kind of rearranged a few things in those minor locations where it changed. And that's it.
Okay. Anything changed on the elevations?
Nothing.
No heights have changed, anything? Okay.
It's just a formality, hopefully.
Okay, well, let's open public comment. Do we have anyone that would like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore and board members. So going to in-person public comment, I do have one request to speak for this item from Maria Zait. If you would like to please come up.
Hi, good afternoon, board members. I'm Maria Zache. I live at 601 East Mitchell-Torena Street. I expect this project is going to be approved, obviously. I do want to take this time for public comment just to reiterate my concern about the construction staging, the magnitude of this project with the underground garage that needs to be put in, the massive excavation that needs to be done, the very narrow street, which is South Sepulveda Street, which is only 2 vehicles wide, and there's no parking on either side. So there's no public parking on that street for any kind of construction vehicles or equipment to load, unload, stage. And furthermore, there is no parking in front of this owner's property fronting Mitchell-Torena Street. That is a red curb as well. And it's there because it's on the corner, and it makes it very difficult to make that right turn without hitting oncoming traffic coming from the other side. So my question is, will the applicant be required to file a formal plan and have a process for how they are going to be effectively keeping that area safe for access for all the residents who live at Bella Riviera and the surrounding areas? Bella Riviera has 115 units. 160 vehicles have to use the 2 driveways that only can be accessed from South Sepulveda Street, which is directly across from the applicant's project. It's already a very crowded and tight space. There is Marburg trucks, there's numerous deliveries, there's visitors. So I really would encourage the city to please put together a formal plan that the applicant would have to adhere to keep that area safe for access, ingress, egress, and also safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All
Anybody
right,
else?
thank you, Chair Moore and board members. So at this time, I don't have any more requests to speak in person, so I'll move to virtual public comment. So if anyone joining by Zoom would like to speak on item 2, please go ahead and raise your hand and I will call on you. All right, so I don't see any hands raised for this item and we did not receive any written correspondence. So with that, I'll turn it over back to you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to address the construction staging at this point? I mean, generally, the city requires some sort of construction staging plan that they sign off on, et cetera. So hopefully that addresses the concern.
Chair Moore, I can add to that. So that was also a concern that was brought up at the Planning Commission. And as you know, land use items like construction and staging conflicts and other land use issues are the subject of their Planning Commission's review. So they did discuss that somewhat. A condition of approval was added. It's a standard condition of approval talking about no off-site parking, construction parking on Mitchell Terrain or Salsa Puedes, and the applicant has agreed to that by virtue of accepting their conditions of approval. It's typically the responsibility of the contractor, that's hired for the project that would come up with a construction staging plan, including access. They would be required to secure any permits through Public Works for any road encroachments needed, whether for utilities or improvements. So they work closely with the Public Works Department for anything in the public right-of-way. And those permits would have to be obtained during construction, and then it'd be up to that contractor to figure out not only a staging plan, but also worker, employee, traffic, or getting to the site. So whether it's through carpooling or other kinds of means, or off-site parking agreement with another vacant property nearby that can have their construction vehicles. There's different methods to that. So that onus lies with the contractor, and then the city responds to any violations of the conditions regarding parking, and then all other elements are worked out through Public Works.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's go to questions. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions, or would you like to start?
No questions.
Okay, Vice Chair Six?
No questions.
Mr. Black?
None.
Mr. Noon?
None.
Mr. Whalen?
None.
Okay, my only question is on the landscape plan, there's a hatch on the sidewalk. Is that just indicating new sidewalk, or is that indicating a pattern, or pavers?
Indicating new sidewalk, and it is going to be permeable.
Correct.
Per the civils plans.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we go to comments? No? Mr. Whalen, do you want to start us off with
I
comments?
think it's ready for project design approval.
Okay, anyone else? Anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Down here?
No, I would jump to a motion for project design approval with the plans as submitted, and I think that's it.
That's it, short and sweet. Okay, do we have a seconder of that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, we do have to read the
Yes.
compatibility finding.
So this project is compatible with the following. It is consistent with the guidelines of the area in which it is located. It is compatible. It is, number two, it is compatible with the architecture character of the city and the neighborhood in which it is placed. Number three, it is of appropriate size, mass, bulk, height, and scale as to, in reference to the projects surrounding it. It is not sensitive. It is not sensitive. There are no adjacent landmarks or historic resources which would be affected by this new project. There are no public views of the ocean and mountains that would be affected, and there is adequate open space and landscaping introduced.
Okay. Anything else to add? Any discussion? No? Okay, we can take our vote.
All right, I'll start with Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Block,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we need a 2-minute break? Let's recess for 2 minutes, please.
Can we just announce that there is an
Oh,
appeal period for
there is-
project design approval as well?
Okay, the appeal process is displayed on screen if you would like to follow that.
Thank you.
Back up. Okay, we're on item number 3, 501 Garden Street. This is a one-time pre-application consultation review for a proposal of a 10,000 square foot, 4-story mixed-use building with 7 rental apartment units totaling 7,214 square feet and 383 square feet of commercial retail space. 10 parking spaces are provided. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Project requires compliance with the project compatibility findings. Interesting, and nothing else? That seems odd.
Those I like sometimes throw in, but just as a friendly reminder,
Okay.
don't need to pay attention to that last comment about PC findings. So,
Okay. All right. Welcome. If you could introduce yourselves and take us through your proposal.
Thank you. Ryan Mills with DMHA.
Michael Stroh with DMHA.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Quick introduction. So we're the DMHA team. The owner is Red Bridge Capital. Our landscape architect, who's officially on board, just not here yet, is Katie Klein with Perry I. That's right. And yes, so we're looking, it's the first time we have done design review on this project, so looking forward to feedback and getting the right path forward. A little bit of overview, which is helpful. So we are MC zone priority housing overlay, which is the range of 37 to 63 acres per unit. As you know, we are landing at the 51 acres per unit. We have a net lot of just over 6,000, so 6,092, so a fairly small urban downtown lot. And then through the AUD program, as you mentioned, we are allowed 8 units, but we settled back into 7. And allowable square footage for those was 941, so we just got under that at around 937. There is going to be 1 commercial space on the corner and then 10 parking spaces, and we'll show you in the plan. 7 of those will be coming from a puzzle lift in the podium. So let's go to the next sheet. Try to move through. Okay. You probably all know the site, but let's zoom in and look at it one at a time, starting in the bottom right. So bottom right is the corner of Garden and Haley. So Garden to the right, Haley to the left. And right now it's that empty parcel. And then this next photo is there behind that white SUV is our parcel, and left is the adjacent project. And then next is looking from Garden Street. Oh, you're fine. Anyway, top left. It's making it tricky for me. Top left is we're from Garden Street, looking back down at the empty parcel. SB Cast on the right. You see that first 2-story massing. And then this is us on Haley, looking dead on to the Haley elevation of the parcel with SB Cast in the background. And then the next sheet, I believe. Okay, so bottom right is a similar, oh, wait, are these the same views? No. Okay, so similar, we're at the intersection looking mostly up Garden Street. I guess in this view you get that adjacent animal hospital across the street. Here we are in front of that animal hospital next to a transformer and crosswalk, looking more up or down Haley at our parcel. You can see, again, getting a hint of some of the existing conditions behind us, our adjacent neighbor. Let's keep going. So SB Cast is on the right. It's showing, it's not a true alley, but we've been calling it that. All the projects around it call the alley, but you'll notice there's a swath and an apron between SB Cast and our proposed project. And then here's the Garden Street elevation. Okay, so next, wanted to show you some greater context. So Haley running, Mike, if you want, there you go. Ask you to zoom out one more time just so I can read all those notes.
Zoom in or zoom out?
Zoom out. Okay, so Haley, you can see running kind of northwest to southeast. And then we are there in the middle in the red dashed line project site. And then just some things around the neighborhood. Starting at the top right is El Zapato, if you know, 2- and 3-story project. Shelton project, and then SB Cast 2 and 3, which is one of our adjacent neighbors. And then moving up Haley, existing 2-story, I think it's a chapel church building. And then moving up Haley, as you know, that's an approved 3 and 4-story project. Then there's Love's Towing, and then the corner parcel is most likely a future approved project. And then other than that, the bottom is kind of some more of the later 3 and 4-story projects coming through the system there, and then actually just the next block on Santa Barbara Street as well. So kind of demonstrates it's a neighborhood in transition. It's the east-west corridor and designated for this use. Okay, let's go. So where we wanted to start was coming up with, considering all the guidelines in town, everything we know and love, we wanted to look backwards first. This is primarily an apartment project, so we didn't feel like we needed to reinvent the wheel. So we wanted to see, well, what is authentic? What is happening or did happen in Spain with this project type? So things we want you to notice, and that kind of resonated with us, is just the simplicity of form, honesty, everything. The massing is very simple, not a lot of pushing and pulling. Fenestration is very simple and regulated. So we kind of felt like this is a predominant way to design Spanish apartment buildings throughout southern Spain. So both in alleyways and paseos, but also courtyards and piazzas, big and small towns. So we wanted to look backwards before we went forward. So that was really our draw and inspiration for Mass Bulk and Scale. And then on the next sheet, this is just about then how might we take all of those components and elements and still do something authentically current, not modern, not contemporary, but just using all the same pieces and parts, but express them authentically with today's means and materials and way we build things and opportunities. So just starting on the top left, things we're looking at again, and simple massing, simple openings in the top left. Actually, the penthouse unit, or the 4th floor, is something that we have been looking at, just either setting back, which you see in a lot of these examples, or even changing the architectural language and material just to further separate and reinforce the apparent mass at the street frontage. So this is just some examples in different locations, many in Spain. Then obviously we all recognize the one on Anacapa there. Okay, let's go site survey. If you have any questions, we can go back there. So otherwise, let's start on the first floor, which is really the site plan. You can zoom in a little bit, Mike. So starting from Haley, we have a couple setbacks for the AUD. We got the dedication of about, it is 3.2, and then the additional 5-foot setback. We also have the 5-foot setback along Garden, which you will see we're actually using the variable setback method. So sometimes less, sometimes more. And then otherwise, organizing principles is this being a corner lot. It feels more comfortable than an infill, but so commercial at the corner makes the most sense. The lobby or the entry to the apartments is off of Garden Street. We studied both, but we think the main front door should be there. It's a little quieter and more pedestrian friendly. We do have an entry off of Haley, which is adjacent the bike room, so we thought that was good flow. And then obviously connected to the stair and elevator, which we've pushed to the back of the property in this case. And then to the right of that, really one of the main pieces of this project is the parking. So as efficiently laid out as we can, and then you'll notice on the right, those 4 white boxes represent the lift. So it's 4 spots, but with a puzzle lift, you lose 1 spot for the movement. And then back right is our second stair, electrical room, and then the very bottom right corner is our transformer pushed back, kind of adjacent with the facade of the building. Next to that, I'm going to say alley, and then SB Cast. So we thought that was the right location for that. Other things to consider really quick on this. So as you can see, we have a healthy, setback along Haley and Garden to make it pedestrian friendly. And then we did consider, so the little cottages along Haley at the front, we've pulled back that stair corridor. I don't know the exact feet, like 3-4 feet off the property line, and they're about a foot or so off the property line. Then we do go to 0 along the parking area, because just we needed the space, and then circulation out. So we're 0 lot line just along parking on the first floor. We step back as we go up, and then obviously along the alleyway, we're 0 lot line. Okay. As we move up, again, in the spirit of those old images and efficiency, so the second floor and third floor are duplicates. So we're just moving the way up. So on the left, we have Unit 1, which is a 2-bedroom. The middle one is essentially a slightly smaller version of that, another 2-bedroom. And then the last one down Garden is a 1-bedroom. Couple things to note. So again, we pushed all the circulation to the west side of the project just to free up all the public views for the livable areas. Other thing to note is part of the design feature here is we have very thickened walls, again, along Haley and Garden Street as part of our design detailing. Super thick walls with rails and balconies built in. So that's the second and third floor. So you can see it's a duplicate with one exception. So as we move up, you see in the top left of the plan is a patio. So we're carving that corner out as we move up. Likewise, on the very right along Garden, we are stepping back patios, and particularly we reduced that the unit 6 to a studio, so pulled out that bedroom to further step. And then as we get to the rooftop, so continued the stepping. So we are pulled back on all 4 sides. So wanted it to be a narrow rooftop, almost like a rooftop amenity looking piece. And as you'll see in the last rendering, it tends to recede and goes away. So patios surrounding, and then the common open space. So our roof deck really accommodates our required open yard now. So logically, we started with that corner massing. That virtual building was a good place to do it, open to the sun, light, and air on the street corner. So, So we were required about that space. It's a little more generous than it has to be, but as you can see, we started introducing planters, keep people away. I can answer questions in the future. There's also storage up there. Elevations. So Haley on the left. So we wanted to hold the corner with the most traditional piece, tallest, so you can see reminiscent of those old Spanish apartment buildings. Very regulated fenestration, very simple rhythm put together, but you notice we did break down to 3 main massing pieces that get smaller as you go down Garden. And then the penthouse, we intentionally want a different language. Again, it's pushed back, but we want it to look like, again, you see the parapet of the 3 stories is what most people will experience, and then this is almost like an addition, like you see happening in Spain so many times. One design detail just to talk about is, if you go back, we're introducing a screen element inspired by like traditional roll-down shades in Spain. We wanted to introduce that and play with that as a detail, both where it connects first and second levels, and you can see just a whimsical element as they come out windows, and almost like a carpet hanging over a parapet wall. So wanted to introduce some fun material there that does match the penthouse above. This is the Haley unit. As you can see, we step down on the corner. That tall element behind is the elevator tower pushed back. As you can see, so even though we expect the adjacent parcel to be redeveloped soon as well, but we still, for now, slight nod to the stepping down, although it's most likely going to be a similar type of project in the near future. This is the west elevation. So 0 lot line is from the elevator tower to the left on the first floor. Well, the opposite of that.
Oh,
so that, yep. And then you can see in the middle portion, kind of there's 0 lot line buildings, in the front and the back. And then where they have space right there, we've actually stepped our plan back for the circulation, and there's a step out patio with planters. and then up again to the penthouse, pushed all the way back. And then you can see on the right, the component closest to Haley is pushed off, so we do have an opportunity for landscaping, albeit tight. Let's go next. This is that alley presentation, elevation along SB Cast, similar massing sections. Just want to point out very quickly here, what's important is the height driven by podium, which is about, I can't read.
It's 15.8 from floor to floor.
Floor to floor, which is driven by the lift. And then the three.
Also in the flood zone. So.
Yeah, that's right. And then the floors above, you'll see we have a 9.2 ceiling height in all those, which we think allows us to have 8-foot ceilings in all bathrooms. So we just feel like that's a requirement for these projects.
Allows us to hide our mechanical equipment as well without putting it on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Let's go next. And then zoom in a little bit. So, I mean, things to point out. So we have our back across the intersection to the building, right? So this, we wanted to pick a view that showed you as much as you could possibly see of the 4th floor. So again, want to point out, really holding the corner on Haley, we thought was important, and to look the most traditional and relate to the east-west corridor of Haley. Then as it breaks down and moves towards Garden, as you can see, I'm hinting at SB Cass, the elevation can evolve a little bit. And Garden Street is fairly eclectic. You have SB Cass, you have El Zapato, and there's lots of different things going on. So we thought some of the whimsical elements could happen on that Garden Street facade, but maybe stayed more traditional and true to town on the Haley corner. Anything else to add to that?
No, you got it.
I'm out of time. Thank you. We're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Let's open public comment, if we could.
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore and board members. So starting with in-person public comment, if you would like to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker slip and hand it to me. But at this time, I don't have any speaker slips, so I'll move to virtual public comment. If anyone joining by Zoom would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and I will call on you. At this time, I don't see anyone with their hand raised for this item, and we did not receive any written correspondence, so I'll turn it over back to you, Chair Moore.
Okay, let's close public comment and go to questions. Mr. Whalen, do you want to start us off?
Sure, just 2 comments. Mr. Mills, could you talk about the treatment of the garage opening?
Sure. Let's go to the elevation section. Elevation on Garden, zoom in there. So on the Garden Street garage opening, so right now that middle portion is set back between the 2 masses. I just want to make sure we point that out. So that facade is pushed back. I believe it's 2 feet from the Haley. I don't have the exact, so it's pushed back. And then what we anticipate there is you can see the stucco reveal some amount of corbel detailing, a clean version of that, and really just a thick, perhaps foot-thick wall. Again, not yet detailed or sorted out. In other projects, we've had kind of this throat, right, where you can drop ceilings, but the intent is to keep it as low as we think we can. That perhaps is shown a touch higher than code minimum, but right now it's really just a thick opening in that facade.
Do you anticipate a grill, a grate, a gate, that sort of thing?
Great question. Not currently.
You're
but
not there
that might
yet.
be not there
All
yet.
right.
Well, and I don't know if we can. Again, in other projects where we do that, the car is able to get off the street. Here we cannot. So I'm not sure if we can.
Okay. And then a larger question, why do you want the 4th floor to look different? You said that was intentional.
Yeah.
What's your design philosophy there?
Yeah, so we, in that research, looking back and looking at, there's often a move of taking a traditional building and its original massing and differentiating, say, the penthouse addition from the rest of the building. Now, often you do that when you want to ensure the visual difference between new and old. In our case, we are all new, obviously, but we still like the idea that it looks like There was an original building, and the fourth floor is distinctly different, smaller, and it, to us, it breaks up the visual massing as well. And in some ways, so we'd like to study that, we want it almost to look like a rooftop trellis instead of a whole, we thought white stucco massing or an additional roof drew more attention to it than if we took this approach.
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Noon?
No questions.
Mr. Black?
Just a quick questions. What do you anticipate the material is going to be for this sort of draped design element that you're showing? You spoke of it.
Yes. We looked at, throughout Spain, you get the traditional roll-down shades, and they're modernly made too now in either louvered metal or wood louvers. So again, as an idea, it could be a wood type material or a synthetic wood type material. Our starting point's a little more natural that way. Perhaps it could get to a metal material, not sure yet. So that's definitely one element we'd love to get a little feedback on. Not only in kind of the larger areas, but as a whimsical design element kind of sprinkled throughout.
Another quick question. Thank you for that. So, at least from what I can see, it looks as though there's at-ground planting, strip along the sidewalk. I see that off to the corner at Haley, there's pots and what have you, but I assume that's probably just for illustrative purposes. But do you anticipate having planting could sort of wrap around, if you could? I know SB Cast has, albeit not very grand, but it does have
Yes.
planting
So I don't know
on
if we wanna
the ground floor.
Yeah, in most cases, we have between 3 and 5 feet between the back of the sidewalk and the building, depending on how it steps back.
Yeah.
So we do have the ability to,
So absolutely be flanking the garage opening.
Yeah.
That's where we have the most. So we anticipate as much ground landscaping as possible. We do like the idea, you can see here to the property line, it can go in front of that trash and recycling room. Obviously at the main front door, more hardscape.
Yeah.
And then undecided as we turn the corner on Haley, honestly. We're just not sure yet and look forward to working with
I understand.
Katie on those.
Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Six?
Yeah, I wish staff was here, but because I don't quite understand a few things. This is called a priority housing project, correct? It's not an affordable housing
This
project.
is the AUD program.
ADU program. So but none of your units are affordable, correct?
It's for the AUD program.
Isn't there 10%?
So,
yeah, we're.
No, I believe we're under.
the
Under
threshold.
10, so yeah. So the question.
It's considered affordable by design, the AUD program, right?
Yeah. So if there's not a capital A affordable, are there any ordinances or privileges that the capital A affordable can take advantage of that this project takes advantage of, such as increased heights or setbacks?
We haven't asked for any, no.
Okay, very good. Well, just to go to minor things, okay, question, have you confirmed with transportation that you can't have a car wait outside your property line for that gate to close?
We have not. We haven't submitted for DART yet, so we haven't had a formal review from
Okay.
transportation, so.
Thank you. So, I don't quite understand the decorative detail again. The decorative rollout shade, what does that do? What is that shade?
Can you go to the elevation?
If it's from balcony railing downward, how does?
Yes. Yeah, understood. It was an element we saw throughout that often decorated those very simple Spanish buildings.
So
Understand it in terms of authenticity, yes, it was meant to be used draping from the header down. So not used authentically, but that was just an inspiration we drew. Often you see this very plain facade. That was the design element that just added texture and color. So that was a play on it. Now, obviously, the two larger openings, that's just acts as a screen for the larger volume openings. And so really, we're talking those three little pieces to the right. We just used the same ideology and material to do that there as like a decorative rail. So maybe we have to come up with something different, but it was just an idea.
I get it, okay. More decorative. I noticed on your floor plan, first floor, that the lobby is quite significant interior. Did you study any opportunity, such as the Spanish buildings have arcades and so forth, usable to the public on the ground floor, that you could collapse that lobby and have a few of an arcade on punched openings, with punched openings on that ground floor?
We did not.
Okay.
We did not.
I think those are my questions.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, any questions?
Sure. To tag along that last question, is the commercial square footage, is that a required amount or is that a desired amount?
We just felt it was, the most appropriate size in terms of being able to lease it. You know, we've done a number of these where, you know, they're on such narrow lots that, you know, your little commercial space ends up being 220 square feet, and it's really not very useful.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, so the owners of the property intend to use that
Okay.
as their
Like
project office
yeah.
for their company in town. So it's really meant to be a 1-2 person
Okay.
administrative office. No, but it's not fixed. It could push and pull. This is very early, and maybe
Sure.
this is part of the previous question too.
Yeah.
Trash room might grow, vestibule might grow, mail room might grow, so
Yeah.
we're definitely open. We agree the lobby's bigger than it needs to be, so, but we can massage that as we go forward.
Okay. And then on levels 2 and 3, the circulation on the west side, that's all enclosed or that's open?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the roof plan, it looks like the private decks connect to the common open space.
Well, let's see, so connect to the common.
On the west
Probably
side.
would have,
Well,
you'd probably have a gate at the elevator, which would kind of serve as kind of an informal segue into that penthouse unit.
yeah, there should be a gate there.
So that you wouldn't have, so that anybody else using the common open space wouldn't have any reason or way to
Okay.
get to that other way.
And then while we're up here, the storage is for the unit or the,
No, the building usage. So there's, I think, one on each level. So just as property managers too, they requested at every level some additional storage.
okay. Okay. And then if we, well, I think I know the answer to this, but if we can go to the Haley elevation. Did you study stepping down at the Haley Garden Corner or flipping the deck and the massing?
We did have a scheme
Oh,
that did
on the
have
third
that.
floor,
On
the
the
corner
third, sorry,
beam?
yeah, third floor corner.
We at one point did have a scheme that had that. It didn't have the solidity of
Yeah.
sort of those corner buildings that you see kind of everywhere that
Yeah.
we're trying to emulate.
Right.
So,
Okay. And then I noticed also on here, you said it was wood as an idea, but you also mentioned terracotta. Is that still an option?
Yes, we would. Mike and I both have been trying to use terracotta siding for a long time, so that was a material we'd like to explore. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're familiar with kind of that terracotta cladding. So both on those screens and even that fourth floor.
Okay. And then was there any consideration to making the lobby and the residential entrance different? Or was there a reason why they kind of look the same as far as detailing?
Can you ask that again? I'm not sure I followed
The
that.
entrance into the commercial space, like for example on this elevation, and the entrance for the residential lobby on the garden elevation, they look very similar. I was just curious
Yep.
if there was any consideration to making them look different, or what your reasoning was for that.
Yes, we probably have 12 elevation studies on Haley. So I think, again, to announce that corner, we always liked the idea of two large openings. Garden obviously wanted to be the prominent one. So the versions we have on Haley is not kind of combining those two and just having, again, the fenestration separate on its way down. So we do have a few versions of that. We liked a handful of them. So we did study that and be happy to reconsider that if that's important to the board.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Talk to us about the parapet, kind of the idea and design impetus behind just sort of plaster parapets and not including sloped roof or tile roof, and in particular around areas where there's large deck areas on the roof. Did you explore introducing sloped roof areas at those locations to reduce the overall height and mass? If that makes sense to you.
It does.
Okay.
So can we go to the garden elevation? So as you'll see in this elevation, so we let the Haley facade be the tallest. It's a little, as proposed, taller. It's like 48 inches from the deck. So slightly higher, again, just to create a little more protection on that roof deck and visually just height it a bit more, and hierarchy. Let that be taller and let it step down. So what we're showing there is we just envision some layering, like stepping and perhaps like brick detailing, all whitewashed, but if you can picture when you get that brick dentile type of look, all whitewashed, it just adds a nice shadow line. So that's what we pictured there. We looked at imagery. What we did notice is often in the past, right, it would be kind of a cornice and or rooftop, so like mansard type of detailing. So we didn't test that out too far, Chairmore. We liked the idea, again, of just sort of a very simple reveal at the top. We do have the space, but instead we introduced generous landscaping kind of around that perimeter. And we like the idea that it actually stepped and receded rather than kind of pushed outward a bit more.
Okay, and then at the back corner, you've got that third level, pretty large private deck. In plan.
Oh, all right.
So there's a very large
Yes.
private deck there. And you're right up against the property line on that corner. Did you look at finessing that parapet? Because it looks like that parapet is sort of consistent around, as it wraps around the back, right?
No, but we certainly can. We agree it's generous, and that's happy to closer look or pull back the rail there with planting.
And then looking at this plan, is there a way to take the stair that accesses the common open space and flip it? Right now, you've got your second stair kind of stops at the third level, and then this one runs all the way up. Is there a way to shift that so that you could stop that stair number one a floor shorter?
Go down a level. No, it can't be open.
No, I mean, just see how
I know what you're getting at.
the second stair is kind of back there. Is there a way to monkey with that layout to get that stair. So it is the rooftop access stair, so we're reducing that stair tower mass at the front.
You'd still have the elevator, but.
Well, that can move too. Well, okay, something to,
See,
some
yeah,
thoughts that I
we
have.
didn't consider, the starting point was consolidating sort of that entry point for stair and elevator. We could, I'm just looking at, it affects a few things, but we could look into that, or potentially just slide. Might be constrained on the ground floor. I don't know, yeah, it is constrained. We can't slide things to the right, so.
Okay. Well, working our way down, then let's, on the parking, so how many spaces do you need and how many do you
0.
have?
With the AUD program, is 0 required.
And how many do you have?
Owner would love to provide parking for at least 1 per unit, as is valuable. So you see there's 3 on the left, including the ADA, and then the 4 white boxes on the right with a puzzle lift equal 7, so 10 total. So
And there's
7
units.
7 units. So there's a couple. Well, 1 could be for commercial and ADA, right? Yeah. Or 2 could be for commercial, or a unit might have the ability to have 2.
And what's the clearance requirement for your puzzle lift?
It's almost, it's about 13 feet.
So about the same for ADA, an ADA space, or a band space?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other follow-up questions? Go ahead.
On your elevations, it looks like there's a different material or color along the base. Can you talk a little bit about
Yes.
that?
Just like many of those reference imagery, there's often a base plinth of stone or even tile cladding. So we are looking at, again, haven't detailed it, but a slight reveal, and it's either just a darker stucco, like, I don't think it's concrete in this case, but something more traditional, but something with heavier texture, deeper color. We didn't think actual stone or tile was appropriate. We don't see that too often here, so some just break in color and texture of the stucco.
And then one last follow-up question. On the flood elevation, is there anything we should know about that, or is it?
The only thing we're working around is, so obviously all the habitable space is up above, so that's fine. Equipment, so we have to accommodate and get up. Transformers, fine. And the little commercial unit would require floodgates.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Chair Moore, follow-up question?
Yes.
Do you have anywhere a diagram of the indication of the overhang of the penthouse roof and facade to the footprint of it?
Yes, in section. And
I was hoping more than section.
Oh, there's one. There it is. So here's, go to that. Yep, zoom in there. So currently we're showing, so to the right is the west neighbor. And so there's that larger terrace we were talking about. So our roof overhang default, I think, was about 5 feet, which on the right basically covers that walking corridor, right? So right to that parapet wall where you circulate, and then, so that was a starting point all the way around.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
about average 5 feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we go to comments? No? Who would like to start? Anybody?
Oh, I thought you were going to call on me, so I'll go ahead and
No.
start. In general, I think the size, scale, mass are acceptable. I appreciate the setbacks and the volumetric variations. The materials and the imagery are fine. I might suggest you consider a separate bike entry for that room, thus avoiding bikes being taken through the lobby, and some of them will, to get to the elevator. Some of them are going to take them to their unit, but that might be more of an encouragement for the use of bikes if there were a direct door into that. The cornice detail, you described it as a soldier course that was of brick that was whitewashed. Did I understand that? Still
Or like a
working on it.
Dentil, you often see bricks turned at 45. There's
Yes.
lots of examples
Some-
in town. We can bring more examples.
Some interesting shadow pattern, whether it's projected as a more traditional cornice, I think would enliven the elevations. The fourth floor trellis, you described it as you wanted it to be different. You know, I'm reminded of buildings in Rome, which proliferate with illegal constructions on top. They're called abusivos, because they abuse, and they're sort of much loved and hated at the same time, because people are adding. In your case, I seriously question the design integrity of changing it that much. I liked your suggestion of perhaps it looked more trellis-like. It appears to be, to me, to be a little too foreign. And while we're on this elevation, I would encourage you to articulate this elevation a little bit more, because that passageway which connects to the other lot is going to be permanent. Nobody's ever going to build up to it. So maybe very few people would ever see it, but I do think that it could stand a little more articulation. Let's see, I think I saw a drawing discrepancy too on the heights of the building. Where did I see that? Let's see. Was it on the north and the east? See, here the elevator tower seems to project above, and then on other elevations it doesn't project as much. Not a big deal. It doesn't even appear on that elevation. I got a little confused by that. But back to the comment about the fourth floor. If you want the building to look authentic, I would try to make that fourth floor a little more in character with the other threes. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Noon?
Thank you. Could you go back to that Haley rendering? I'm sorry, the elevation, the rendered elevation.
Sorry, I went the wrong way.
That's all right. I'll just be quick. I mean, I concur with.
Which side?
Haley. Yep.
Haley, oh, here we go.
I concur with the comments previously made about the size. I would just quickly add the horizontal. I know you haven't specified a material, but I think I find that successful. And if you could switch to the other side along Garden. In the two larger openings, I think that's successful. I know you're still working out the details on the overhang, the hanging suspended. If it's the way it looks like, maybe it's wood, maybe it's something else. It looks a little heavy. You're the designer though, so I'm not saying that's a condition, just something to think about, but it sounds like you guys are considering that. And then on that fourth floor, I guess I would go the other direction than the previous comment. I like, is horizontal, was that ever looked at? Would that make it look not as tall? You'll probably never see it, like you said. But I like the change of material, and I agree also with the cornice detail, you described how it steps back. I think that's in the right direction, so, good.
Okay, Mr. Black.
I would agree with Mr. Noon's comments. I like the notion that, as you've shown it, of the fourth floor being different. You're not going to see it that much anyway, and I just think I think the whole project has some real potential for some really sort of fun detailing, and I think it's thoughtful, and I think it's just going to be really interesting aesthetically from what I see here. So yeah, I'd favor what you've shown here.
Okay, Vice Chair Six.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I so appreciate an applicant taking a priority housing project and providing the appropriate amount of parking and space and so forth for the realities of rental apartments. I very much appreciate that. Second, and I appreciate the massing too. However, it seems like there is a lot of opportunity, especially, and I think it's been mentioned before on the front elevation, the Haley elevation. We know that Haley is an area in transition, and we're going to see a lot of large 3- and 4-story buildings. But here we have, as evidenced by your significant stepping back on the northern portion of garden, that there's a lot of room to introduce more 2-story appearing elements that are compatible with the 2-story elements along Haley. So we're not taking a giant leap forward. We have a building that's not totally into the future of where Haley is going, but an opportunity to identify with some of the existing 2-story along the corridor there. So I think that carving more, one comment was to take the carve out in front of the elevator and put it to the corner. So some more introduction of 2-story elements, at least slight setbacks on that 3rd floor to accommodate the 2-story prevalence of 2-story along Haley. I think that the penthouse, you've got a good thing going with your setback, but then I think you've taken away, and you can see it from your 3-dimensional elevation, that you're announcing it again to the street with the significant overhangs. I would suggest that it becomes more compatible with the architecture, that you pick and choose where that overhang should be, and perhaps some of it should be just very minimized parapet. So you fully appreciate the setbacks that you have accomplished, and don't reapproach again and diminish the setbacks with this large continuous overhang. I think that your comment on it being a trellis-like thing is not quite there right now. It's a contemporary fascia, and maybe beam ends or very light fascia with beam ends, whatever. I think it should be a lot more compatible. And I think I like the architecture. I like the style. I think that the horizontal, as opposed to one board member, the horizontal siding is taking away from your success here, and it could be like a frame panelized row and rows and columns of, a more traditional but woodsy technique to that. So I find successful find more opportunities to introduce cut-ups and second-story features in the front elevation. I think we would like to see if we can get a metal gate on the entry to the garage.
Vice Chair Six, when you say middle gate, what does that mean?
The garage door opening.
You'd like to see them.
I'd like to see a gate at the garage.
If we're able. Okay.
Yes, okay, sorry. But yeah, I think it's a good project.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
I think this is a good example of appropriate floor-to-floor heights and still fitting within the height limit and getting everything that we want for an AUD project. I think the massing is appropriate. I would like to see a perspective looking down Haley. I think the biggest concern is driving in a tunnel and starting to feel like these buildings are, falling on you. And I think that's what happens. It starts at the 3rd floor. So I think a perspective down the street would actually help us identify that.
Downtown side.
Yeah, looking towards Milpas. Yeah, with traffic. I think it's appropriate that the 4th floor penthouse is a different material. I think further study of the terracotta screen would be cool and appropriate for this neighborhood and location. I would continue studying proportions and heights of parapets, the archways and exactly where they're used, and if it's a pure arch or if you are stopping and doing a little arch. I don't think introducing tile roof is appropriate for this, and I think it's a good example of a transitional piece of architecture.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I think the mass, bulk, and scale is appropriate for the location. I think the setbacks along the street are appropriate as you've presented them. I think areas where you could continue to refine the project are on the interior property lines, especially in that rear corner. I think there's we need to give some foresight to what comes next door. And I think in particular, there's a lot of opportunity, I believe, as Vice Chair Six indicated that, or one board member indicated that the alleyway, which is fairly narrow and probably not going to be developed, seems like there's opportunity if you were to set your building back slightly on an upper level that you could introduce openings or additional windows and things like that along there. And I would encourage you to study that kind of rear facade and the interior facade to address the neighbors a little more friendly. I think the overhang on the 4th floor unit, while kind of interesting and cool looking, I think it's definitely going to be visible. So I think that needs to get pulled back tighter. And I think, this is just not necessarily aesthetics driven, but I feel like the fact that the commercial space on that corner is I feel like the fact that it's so diminutive that it's going to really impact the usability. I understand the owner wants to use it for now, but what happens in the future if they don't want to use it and somebody else could come in there and needs it? I think Haley being that type of street that needs commercial on the ground floor, and I think that is an opportunity to expand that and create more of a storefront presence on Haley. I don't know why you would need that second door for the residents to come in there. If you're saying the main entrance is on Garden Street, then make that the entrance. Get rid of that, expand the commercial space, or expand the bike room so it becomes more accessible. Utilize that lobby space a little bit better. It seems like you're kind of swimming in space there. I think that's it. Anything else before we move them along? So is this comments only? Okay, so there's your list of comments. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Abusive, abusivo. And if you know Rome, you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, just give us a few minutes to set up here. All right, so we are on to item number 4, and it's 1212 Coast Village Road. And this is a concept review, so it's a proposal for a facade renovation and tenant improvement to an existing restaurant and adjacent office building. No proposed changes to existing hotel building. Minor changes to parking to remove 2 diagonal parking spaces, which will be relocated elsewhere on site. No appealable decision will be made at this hearing. The project will require compliance with the project compatibility guidelines. Welcome. If you could introduce yourselves.
Jeff Shelton,
There you go.
Jeff Shelton, architect.
Maddie Shelton?
Lisette Elenes, architect.
All right, good evening. This project on what I consider Old Coast Highway still, growing up here, one of these leftover buildings. It's been a restaurant and been a number of different things over the years. It's a sort of a shed with a shed added onto it, another add-on and a lean-to. And when Clark's came to us to ask what we should do, we thought about staying in that old shack style. And it's sort of a structural mess to add on to, and we wanted to give this Clark's a different presence here on Old Coast Village Road. So as you can see on this site plan, we're not adding any square footage. We're moving some diagonal places, parking there where that colored patio is. We're moving them over to the middle road. So we're keeping the footprint. We're keeping the little building. It says existing office. That is a cute little building. We'll get to that in the photos in a second. And we want to add a entry gateway, which you will see that sort of connects the 2 buildings to make it one project, and sort of slows the cars up also as they come in. It's 14-foot clearance for fire department, et cetera. So we'll get into that. But that's what we're basically adding. Let's go to the next. Here's what we've got. Let's start in the upper left, Maddie. This is from Coast Village Road. We will be, of course, replacing those planter things made of stone. There's some kalanchoe, which are pretty cool there. We'll try to keep. We'll get to the landscaping after we get through concept. But as you can see, there's the building that's been added on for decades, and there's that back screen hiding all that roof equipment there. We're keeping that height, but plastering over it. Next, go to anyone. There's the entry. That's been added on a number of different times. We'll be replacing the whole walkway, et cetera, and the ironwork. But in the architect here, we could see that it was a mess trying to add on to this. Next. Here's from the side looking at the entry. A lot of 1970s diagonal siding there, and 90s vertical siding, and you got a little bit of everything. Next. This is further up. We're moving those 2 diagonal spots over to Middle Road. But there you can see, the roof line makes no sense. Now we're going to keep that roof, but hide it. Next. We passed, go back. There. Just looking around the corner, as we get farther back, it gets crazier. Keep going. Back looking on the left photo, you see the orange tree in a pot. That's the back side. The bottle shop is to the right. This other one looks, where are we looking here? We're looking back down towards from Middle Road. This is looking at the building. It's actually a cute little building that we're keeping on the left, just replastering it and maybe adding some tile. That's that building there. It's just it's simple. We don't want to mess with it too much. There it is right there. And from across the street, okay, go ahead. That little building there. And then from across the street, there's the whole site. All right?
Before you leave that photo, you've labeled a building hotel, but I don't believe that's the building on
No,
your
that should
property.
be dropped down a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, Maddie. Let's go to the next page. Here's the existing floor plans. Clark's is basically doing the interior. So we haven't really got, I told them let's not get into that too much until we get through concept. But basically it's this whole front end is the real problem, structurally, et cetera, and that's what we're going to be going after. Next. Here it is. That's in its glory. Next. Now this is the new plan, and the roof plan is going to show it a little bit better, but this whole bar in front and this entry, this is really what is sort of setting the stage for our building, trying to open it up to the street, giving it an identity that you can actually want to go inside is the idea, with nice lighting on the inside. But we're going to open up that whole roof area at that bar area on the left side. Maddie, can you point to that on this area here?
Mm-hmm.
This area, about 11 feet in. That is really what you're going to see when we get to the elevations. Next. And this is showing, we're adding parapet. So the idea is, instead of trying to add new eaves and replace the whole roof, we're keeping the roof and adding parapets around these three sides, almost not along the bottle shop side, just turning the corner on both sides. And then making a vault on the whole, over the bar in the front, 11-foot vault, 11 or 12-foot vault. Next. We'll get to some color elevations, but this takes on the south elevation here, it shows we're encapsulating the building, and the building sits inside this basically, and this whole front room, 12 foot of the front room, is this vaulted ceiling, open area room, which leads back to the dining. And it is cramped in there, and it's tight little shed building in there. So this gave it some air architecturally on the inside. The outside, it gave it a presence. As you're driving down, you can notice a building, notice that there's something inside of it. And then the entry is this on the right side of the arch is a tiled entry to sort of make it obvious where you go into this building. On the upper elevation along the parking lot, we've added where those parking spots were. We added, and I probably should have showed you on the plan, we'll get back to that later, but we've added dining along that area with awnings. And this will soften that whole edge, get rid of the car drives on through and then parks. This will make sense when it gets colored too, you'll see in a second. On the far side, on the upper side, we accented that part. It wasn't at first, but they have, I guess they make great bread, and they highlight their bakeries, and that their bakeries in there, and that's sort of a big big fixed window, I believe, as you're coming from your car, you can see where the bakery is and watch them bake bread. Next. This is from the bottom one would be from the hotel. You can't really see this like that, but it has The building on the right is the one we're really remodeling. There's the arch that I've just popped in there. We'll get to that. Next. And this is from the bottle shop. You'll see we turn the corner 11 or 12 feet now on the right to give that mass, kind of anchor it there, and then up on the upper towards the hotel, that 11-foot, whatever it says there, also turns the corner. That was a mess. If you get out to the site, you'll see that. It was just a little add-on there, so we just cleaned it up. It gives you a little idea what's going on. There's the entry through the section to the bar. We haven't done the interior, of course, but it gives you that front, how we're solving the roof lines. And then there's a section on the upper one, section BB, through the existing mechanical area on the roof and the existing restaurant. If you've ever been in Cava, that's what it was like. Next. Colored elevations, I just showed you those, but this is what's going on. We're using the Clark's color palette, which is kind of a light blue, buttercup, soft color, white, black. So we just sort of took their palette from their logo, and I thought it was appropriate for the street also. Highlighted the entry, always like to do that. The arch is, once again, tying the two structures together, so it's one thing you're going to. The upper elevation, the east elevation, just shows you an idea for the patio space, some perhaps retractable canvas, some smaller tables under one, and then maybe the other color separates a bigger area. Sort of just break up that idea instead of just one eating area there. There you can see the bakery at the back, similar to the front. Next. Color elevation, what we talked about, is just trying to clean that building on the right up, have a little fun. And as far as landscaping goes, we'll be getting to that when we get through concept, but we basically know where our planters all are. They're there. Can you go back to the last one? They're there up against the street. Here you can see them all up against the street where the Kalanchoe are right now. And then we have room for them in front of the patio and near the entry. We have all sorts of little pockets here and there. Anything you'd like to add, or?
I think you did talk about the parking spaces that we're moving, the diagonal spaces. We are relocating them next to Middle Road. And in your plan, you'll see right now that there's a trash enclosure relocation noted on that, on the site plan. But we're actually got some comments that we needed the 10 feet setback or a modification. So we're going to actually remove that part of the project for now at least. And we're going to keep the trash enclosure where it's located right now. So that even gives us more space for our two spaces that we were relocating along Middle Road.
Okay. Anything else?
I think we're fine.
I think that's good, yeah.
Okay. Let's open public comment. Do you have anyone that would like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore and board members. So starting with in-person public comment, I haven't received any requests to speak, so I'll move to virtual public comment. If anyone joining by Zoom would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and I will call on you. At this time, I don't see anyone wishing to speak via Zoom, and we did not receive any written correspondence, so I'll turn it over back to you.
Okay. We can close public comment and go to questions. You want to start with you, Ms. Anderson? Any questions?
Sure. Can we go to the front elevation, please? On the, that was fine. Okay, on the south elevation, was there any consideration for the entrance to almost mimic the existing tower and keep it taller than the restaurant?
I guess I have a lot of sketches of this. Yeah, so I liked where that entrance was, so I kept that there. I did have a number of different ideas that were actually too wild. So I just, no, I guess this is what I'm presenting, but it went up and down.
Yes,
Yeah.
you considered it, yeah. And then you mentioned keeping the little shed or the little building to the right, just simplified, and then you're just bringing it into the color scheme. So was there any consideration into taking the same aesthetic as the main bar space into that structure as well?
You mean copy that building?
Not necessarily copy, but have the same architectural language.
Well, yeah, I think I tried to bring that up early. It was such a mess, that front building on the left.
I meant taking your new language and putting that on the building on the right, on the office
Well,
building.
I somehow liked that little building, and I, in some eclectic way, think it works.
Sounds good. Those are my questions.
Okay, Vice Chair Six.
Yes, could you add a little more color to it? No, okay. This is a question for staff. Is it appropriate to have Montecito Board of Review review this as it's kind of in their territory?
I've reached out to my supervisors and kind of asked the question about this. And I can look into it and get back to you at the next hearing. I don't know, maybe they could do a courtesy review, but
Yeah, something that acknowledges their territory.
Are you
But
talking
I
about
think
the county?
No, the Montecito Board
Yes.
of Review.
So-
County.
Is that county?
Yeah.
Okay.
County.
so technically speaking, it is completely within AVR's
Yeah.
purview of
Yeah,
the
I
city.
understand,
So
but it would be at least courteous to reach out and see if they have,
I might let the rest of the board speak to that as well too.
okay. Well, I'm happy to
We can look into
charge
it.
forward, but,
Yeah.
good. So, explain, if you would, the required, the front, on the frontage on Middle Road, and where, first of all, where the trash enclosure existing will be, and what is your solution to the required setback, given that
They've pulled that out of this particular presentation.
but it is critical to their parking arrangements and their addition of dining to this elevation. So you're working on that and have a
No,
solution to
it's-
relocate?
It's not critical. If you can go to the plan, I think we want to see.
Yes. The site plan? Yeah.
Site plan. It's not critical. We wanted to blow up that little area. up
A little
top.
area, yeah.
There. Right now, the trash is over, right there.
Ah,
So we'll just leave it there.
okay, so you can get the two relocated parking in
Correct.
the setback and so forth?
Correct.
Good, that's all I need to know. On the west elevation, were there, you're just simply going to paint the, can you go to the west elevation? The first significant parapet there on the right-hand side of the building, or existing, that's just going to be painted diagonal?
Plastered.
Oh, it is going to
Yeah.
be plastered over the diagonal.
Right.
Oh, we're talking about up to the roof ladder, correct?
Right. We just didn't do anything to it, though. That's the,
But you are going to plaster over that diagonal? Good, 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 okay. Were there, and what is the material of the fence? Is that a new fence in that same area between the bottle shop
No.
and
Right
that?
now, it's existing fence.
At that same diagonal
I
stuff?
wasn't sure exactly whose fence it was, so I just didn't say anything about it, whether it's the bottle shop's fence or our fence.
Okay.
So I don't know at
Be
this
interesting to
point.
pursue that,
Yeah.
would it not? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And was there any, it just seems a great solution, you know, that portion not parapeted with the exposed shed roofs there that we see to the left-hand side of the ladder, that is visible from Middle Road and from Coast Village. Was there any thought of somehow improving that little leftover gap in your wonderful design?
Well, you know, I can't hide it. Of course, I'd love to hide that. So we can look into that to see what, you know, this whole thing spreads, right? You're architects, you know, we don't want to leave something behind, and I guess that it has been left behind, and I'm just telling you, we did. We can talk to Terry, contractors here, and see if we can come up with a way to make the building seem more whole, I suppose, is what you're saying.
Yes, thank you. I think those are my questions.
Okay, Mr. Black, anything?
I have no questions.
Mr. Newton?
No questions. No.
Mr. Whalen?
None, thank you.
Okay. So part of our charge is to ask questions like having to do with compatibility and all of that. So let's take a step back. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the facade, especially on the street side. How does that fit in with the rest of the street and with what's existing on the site and all that?
I'd love to. You know, like I say, it's still Old Coast Highway. It's also Coast Village Road. It's also, as you were talking earlier, it also is an entry gateway road to our city, which we kind of think that's Montecito, but that's the beginning of Santa Barbara. There's always been an odd group of buildings up there on, you know, the Sourdough Burger and the Bath Hotel. I mean, you can get into some really fun ones that have been torn down over the years, and quite frankly, I think some not to Santa Barbara standard have been put in there, and with lacking the right proportion, lacking some of the delight that should be there. I think I think the street needs to be softened up. And I'm saying this in a serious way. You know, it's easy to go bland, and it's easy to go the completely safer route on a lot of these things. But this sticks with many architectural rules with using an ellipse, no fake little arches here, halfway arches. Of course, it's coming in strong, but it's not limping in and limping in for an approval. You know, I love this street. I've always loved this street. I love this town. So, yeah, I want to add to this great part of town.
So I guess I was hoping you could show us more of the street photos and show us what's surrounding it, so we can make that
Well,
case.
I didn't bring them with me. No, this is all I brought with me. But I could do a whole study on that street, and there will be little rhyme or little reason there. In my opinion.
Okay.
It's a bit lost, the street, but I'm trying to pull it back in.
Okay. I too agree that the little office building has a lot of charm and character, and that kind of carries over to the hotel building as well. There's some similar detailing with the overhang walkway and and that kind of stuff, it seems like. And in your mind, there's no way to try and rehabilitate the former Kava building to be more close to those two buildings that are on the site?
Could I go that direction? Yeah, I could do anything. All of us could. I don't think I think it's a better opportunity than pulling that architecture back out. It's not great architecture out there. It's just fine sitting back there. But I don't think that's the piece that you pull out. I think that's the hotel back there, and this is the front commercial, the restaurant at the front.
Okay. Any other follow-up questions? No? Okay, let's go to comments. Who would like to start?
Chair Moore, I think you bring up an interesting discussion, and I would kind of like to hear from the rest of the boards. Thinking that the idea of this being different and a gem in the three complex buildings, three building complex, I think, and the fact that Coast Village Road is very eclectic. I think that we could accommodate and enjoy this this little gem. And would like to hear what the rest of the board members think about compatibility with the general street and compatibility, and most importantly, and I resonate with that, Chair Moore, the other two buildings on the site.
I'll add a couple quick comments. A couple things I agree. The cottage is, the little building is cute. The street is odd. I did a little view up and down, and it is odd. And I think I would probably lean maybe towards, not saying he's leaning this direction, but the questions he was asking, Chair Moore, that I would have liked to have seen that the improvements, closer resemble the cottage. I mean, you're obviously making it cuter than it already is. I think that would be I guess I would have liked to have seen that. So to answer the compatibility question, I struggle with that a bit.
Okay, anyone else want to?
Sure. I think it's a perfectly acceptable design. As to the discussion on compatibility, neighborhood compatibility, it's really a leftover of roadside architecture from the 21st century. Even the bottle shop next door is a former gas station. A number of the buildings are former gas stations. So I think this Sheltonian addition is perfectly acceptable. It even gives it more of a Santa Barbara identity than it has now. There's that large condominium that looks like Italian fascist architecture. So this is something I think that really calms the neighborhood, brings a good human scale to it. And I don't think you really need to do anything to the cottage personally, other than tie it together with the arch. It has a charm just by itself, although I don't object to the addition of the tiles that you propose. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Ms.
sure.
Anderson?
I mean, I think, like you all said, the road is very eclectic, and a gateway to Santa Barbara. I think that was a great point. And I think the existing cottage, tying it in with the hotel, that makes sense, and keeping that, and then focusing on the restaurant as kind of a more of a sculptural piece. I think that also makes sense. And so I could find compatibility in the fact that it is, gateway to Santa Barbara, that it's an eclectic neighborhood, and it's an improvement to the neighborhood and the people. So.
Yeah, I think I agree that, there's a lot of difference on that street, and I wanted to make sure we had that discussion and at least bring that up as far as, does this tie in with that? Is it appropriate? I think one aspect that I'm having trouble with is the scale. And oddly enough, in the opposite way that we normally have problems with scale, there just seems to be a lot packed into a small, relatively small facade, especially on the street-facing facade. So it could be an opportunity to expand that scale a little bit and give yourself a little more breathing room, but, between all these different elements, potentially. Because there is a lot going on in this, because how wide is that building? And that facade is 20, 30 feet wide, maybe? A little wider, maybe?
I actually have this stuff stuck in my head.
About 40 feet.
40 feet wide? Yeah, so to my eye, I feel like if it had some more breathing room around the elements, it might be more successful and be a little less frenetic. So those are my thoughts. I'm not sure you need to decorate the little office building. I think cleaning it up is good enough, because I believe, isn't there some landscape or a wall in front of it?
Yeah,
Looked like on the-
and there will be.
So-
We'll add to that.
So, anyway, those are my comments.
Chair Moore, for example, I'm not suggesting that the design be changed this way, but for example, the breathing room, if the entry canopy was limited to the side and not wrapped around the front, that would be more reducing the features and and giving the front elevation more breathing room. Is that an example of where you would, not to suggest that would be the solution, but is that an example of where you're going?
Yeah, maybe something like that could be studied. I'll leave it up to the applicant.
Absolutely. But now I understand your remark.
Anybody else with other comments? So this is concept review. So we need a motion. Does somebody want to jump in and try and craft that?
So Chair Moore, I would attempt a motion with the following, an indefinite continuance back to the full board with the following comments: that the general direction and unique style is found to be compatible with the neighborhood for the reasons as discussed, mainly the eclectic nature of the Coast Village. And I'll leave it with that. Next would be the applicant to consider somehow reducing the number of Sheltonist elements to provide more breathing room to the front and perhaps side elevation. For the applicant to provide or to consider the remaining exposed pitched roofs on the west elevation. When the project comes back, to have a solidified solution to the setback requirements for the new parking along Middle Road, and additional landscaping in that area. Do you want to take a vote on manipulate the refinements to the office building? I would not. I would leave it as it is.
You can make that part of your motion.
Okay, that the minor material additions to the office building is appropriate. I think that's my motion.
Can we read that back, please?
Yes, thank you. So the motion is to continue indefinitely back to the full board with the following comments. Number 1, the general direction and unique style is found to be compatible with the neighborhood for reasons as discussed, mainly the eclectic nature of Coast Village Road. Number 2, the applicant shall consider reducing the number of sheltonist elements to provide more breathing room to the front elevation. Number 3, the applicant to consider the remaining exposed pitch roofs on the west elevation.
Let's hold on there. How do you want to say that?
Say it again.
She's talking about the screening conflict with the roof, the sloped roof.
Finishing the west elevation.
Yeah, to read it again to me, I'm sorry.
No problem. So 3, the applicant is to consider the remaining exposed pitched roofs on the west elevation.
To improve that area to the level of the the balance of the building.
So I have the applicant is to improve the west elevation in terms of balance in the building.
No. To consider, let's start again, to consider improving the exposed shed roofs on the west elevation to bring that portion of the building in balance with the rest of the building.
Okay, so I have consider improving the exposed shed roofs on the west elevation and bring that portion of the building in balance with the rest of the building.
Okay.
Thank you. So moving on, number 4, when the project returns, have a solidified solution to the setback requirements for new parking along Middle Road and additionally landscaping in that area. And number 5, the minor material additions to the office building are appropriate.
All right. And Chair Moore, do you think on the second item, and more breathability, would that be the both elevations, the front and east?
I mean, it's hard to, well,
Well, let's
I think
just say,
the awnings are,
let's just,
I don't know if they're always going to be out like that or how visible they really are from the street. You know, you don't see the building from this vantage point really. So
so let's just drop the front elevation. So read it without the front elevation.
Yes, so now I have the applicant shall consider reducing the number of sheltonist elements to provide more breathing room
Do the architecture.
to the architecture.
keep it open.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Did we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Okay. Anything you want to add or discuss?
But a point of discussion, if
Yeah.
we could. Just the first statement, when we find compatibility and then essentially say because it's not compatible, I would just like to hear the rest of the boards. Maybe I'm the vast minority of that, but seems like it would be better to maybe clean that up a little bit.
We said, read it again, please.
Yes, so the general direction and unique style is found to be compatible with the neighborhood for reasons discussed, mainly due to the eclectic nature of Coast Village Road.
So we find it, I mean, I want to vote, give a yes vote. I just struggle with that one a bit. Do we want to does the rest of the board find it compatible?
You mean compatible because it's an eclectic road? Is that what you mean?
As it's given.
That's the way I read it.
Well, as a point of discussion, I do find it compatible with the neighborhood because of the eclectic nature of the neighborhood. I would also like to underline that the motion includes to consider reduction of architectural elements and to consider improvements of the shed roof. I don't find these to be absolute directions. The last one, improvements to the adjacent building, I would also prefer that be consider alterations to the building.
I would wholeheartedly support those revisions to my motion.
There, just underlining the way it was made, and then the last one adding consider to improvements to the adjacent building.
Mary, do you know where to input those? The consider.
It's like number 6.
Yeah, so for the last one, I have the minor material additions to the office building are appropriate. So I'm not quite sure how you want me to
Well,
change that.
the point on that building is that my personal feeling is it's just fine without doing anything to it. So alterations to the adjacent building are optional.
I'll go with that.
Go along
Thank
with
you.
that?
Yeah.
Ms. Anderson, is that okay?
Same with the second.
Okay.
And then there was 2 other opportunities for consider as opposed to shall be.
Let me check. So
Number 2, I think.
yeah, for number 2, I have applicant shall consider reducing the number of sheltonist elements.
Just consider.
So I'll change that to just consider.
Yeah.
And then number 3, I have consider improving the exposed shed roofs on the west elevation.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone happy? Okay, let's take our vote.
All right, I'll start with Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Black.
Yes.
Board Member Noon.
No.
And Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Noon, would you?
Just the compatibility issue.
Okay,
That's my only point.
all right. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. And item number 5 has been postponed.
Correct. So we can just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, with that, we can close our meeting for the evening. Thank you very much, everybody.